we are less than 100 days away from the release of Stalker 2, Heart of Chornobyl, and I'm here to tell you everything we know so far. We've been waiting for a new Stalker entry for more than a decade, and Stalker 2 has been pushed back so many times, I was starting to think it was never coming out. But the countdown's on. Spoiler warning, if you don't want any story spoilers, then check the chapter markers and skip ahead now. We don't know that much about Stalker 2's story yet, but I'll be giving some context from previous games while breaking down what we know. Most of this information you'll know if you played the original games or you've seen the trailers anyway, but that's your warning. If you're brand new to the Stalker series, then let me break down some quick lore for you, as Stalker 2 is set after the events of the first 3 games. If you didn't play those and don't plan to, then you can check out my video series with a 3rd installment coming soon. The TLDR is that the zone was created by interference with the world's noosphere, an information sphere that scientists believed they could influence to rid the world of concepts like hatred and aggression. To do this, they formed a super consciousness named C consciousness, which was the combined consciousness of 7 scientists who lived in these nifty test tubes. In the original trilogy, we learned that the creation of the zone was an accident. They conducted experiments in the Chernobyl exclusion zone to avoid detection, and in the first game, if you get the true and canon ending, the main character S.T.A.L.K.E.R kills C consciousness. We also come to learn that C consciousness had the ability to mind control some inhabitants of the zone, who ran under the faction Monolith. Now, moving on to what we know about Stalker 2. We're playing a character named Skiff, and the voice acting is somewhat questionable.
I was attacked while on a job. I got hit in the head, and when I woke up, I was in almost nothing but my birthday suit.
We get some voiceover about him being hit over the head while on a job. It's not clear if Skiff had been in the zone a while, or if he's brand new to the area, or how he arrived, but given he doesn't know why this character would give him a bolt, it's fair to say he's likely new.
Why the hell would I need a bolt? Take a look around.
Bolts are commonly used by stalkers to move through fields of anomalies, and most stalkers would know this very early on, or end up misstepping into death. In another trailer, we meet Strider, who is a character from the 3rd game, Call of Pripyat. Strider was a Monolith member, and likely became disconnected from mind control once S.T.A.L.K.E.R destroyed C consciousness. In his trailer, he talks about this in broad terms, awakening the Chernobyl nuclear power plant without the voice controlling him. In the original series, Monolith were a group of fanatical stalkers who worshipped the Wish Granter, a large stone monolith in the power plant that could grant wishes.
Immortality.
Only these wishes never came true. It was all a ploy. A typical Monolith member is a stalker who was brainwashed by one of the psychic emitters. If you didn't play the original games, this might sound like a lot, but basically what you need to know is they were once a powerful faction controlled by a single entity, C consciousness. In Call of Pripyat, they were heavily fractured, with stalkers like Strider gaining their consciousness back, and the majority of the Monolith force being depleted in the fighting that followed. Now, we don't have a super clear direction on the upcoming storyline, which I'm thankful for. I'd rather the mystery. But we do see the stranger in a trailer who seems to have a strong fascination with the zone. He's also talking to Skiff as though he'd sent him to assassinate someone, and that had been done. I wonder why we're following orders from someone we don't even know. In the prior games, we get some hints the zone may have some kind of supernatural consciousness, with some characters believing they were given special powers like a sixth sense or unnatural connection to the zone by interacting with certain parts of it. I'm really interested to see where they go with this story. The original game set up the zone as a very mysterious place, someone to contain it, someone to open the world to its wonders. This stranger seems to want to protect the zone, but who is he protecting it from, and why is Skiff helping? In terms of storytelling, Stalker 2 looks to be much more involved and heavily revolve around cutscenes. The original trilogy, the protagonist was mute, and while characters were voice acted, you would get a bunch of text to read and stand in front of the NPC while they mindlessly spoke it aloud. The scenes we're seeing in these trailers look amazing. They add humour and depth to the story.
And who the fuck are you?
It looks much more engaging, but I'm a little uncertain about some of the English voice acting. Not having that Ukrainian or Eastern European accent I would have preferred over the generic sounding NPCs, unless this is explained in the story. Something we haven't seen, and may not see before release, is how side content is going to be managed, assuming we have side quests. The original Stalker's side missions were generally quite basic in nature, and often didn't add much to the world. This game has an amazing opportunity to add some really interesting side stories. The zone is such an interesting location, I hope we find old labs to explore or ruined settlements to delve that give us more information on what the inhabitants have been doing. Ultimately, the story could really go in any direction. This game is going to stand alongside the original series rather than feel like much of a continuation. The first game set up the world state, but this game looks to expand on things further. The devs have said you don't need to play the original trilogy to understand this game, but it would be a benefit. At the end of the trilogy, the world wasn't any closer to being able to contain the zone, so the options were rather endless for where this story could go. So let's look at the zone they're giving us. It's been confirmed that Stalker 2 is again open world. It's not super clear how this will be managed. It's being described as seamless, which is a huge upgrade on the previous games that required you to move and load between locations. In their Discord, they're mentioning that the world is more than 60 square kilometers, and that you need more than 100 hours to explore all of its secrets. For comparison, GTA 5's map is 75 square kilometers, and The Witcher 3 is 142 square kilometers. 60 sounds like a solid number for me, especially given we're unlikely to have vehicles or horses as transport options. But that all comes down to how densely packed the environment is, which leads me to my first possible criticism. Everything we've seen so far has been very closely handcrafted, or appears to be scripted sequences or cutscenes within the game, like this player running into a bloodsucker before being pulled into a scripted scene. We haven't seen any significant gameplay or someone walking around the world for 5 to 10 minutes straight, just small 5-second snippets here and there, and I really hope we see something more substantial before release. Their playable demo in 2023 left some critics believing the game needed more polish, but since then the game has been delayed again, so I'm hoping that's been done to add that extra touch. It's worth mentioning just out of fairness, the developers are Ukrainian, there is a war going on, so I will have more sympathy if we have some issues on launch. I just hope they aren't major. We've seen some of what I expect is the open world here in this clip, but it cuts around so fast they could easily be cutting around frame drops and other issues. But this does raise a good point. The character here in this location is from the original games, located at a place called the Garbage. While we don't have an in-game map to show off at this stage, this image of a map that comes with the collector's edition has been released, and it shows some familiar locations and some that will be new. The devs have confirmed that we'll be revisiting areas that will be familiar, and new locations as well, which makes sense. The zone hasn't moved, it's still in the exclusion zone. The first 3 games all borrowed assets from one another, and some locations were near identical, so I'm really looking forward to this being brand new, to see what they've done to the old locations as well as the new, and how it all fits together. The game is being developed in Unreal Engine 5, and what can I say other than this will be one of the best video games on the market for visuals alone on release, assuming we get what we're seeing. But that's also why I'm concerned we haven't seen any freeform gameplay of someone traversing the open world. With these looks and a large seamless open world, I'm going to be somewhat worried about performance, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. If we don't see review copies sent out and we're still asking this question day one, it might be worth holding off to see how it plays, but the devs are stating that what we're seeing is what we'll get, so just going to cross my fingers on it. But let's continue with that in mind. We have mutants, other stalkers and humans inhabiting the zone, and the models all look really solid. Again, limited actual open world visuals, but I hope it's similar. The bloodsuckers look amazing. The original Stalker model did fine for the time, but these actually spark some terror. Their invisibility also looks much more effective, which could lead to some really immersive and horror-like scenes within the game. Stalker has always done Immersion so incredibly well with its sound design, its lighting, its environments, and what I'm seeing here looks like it's going to continue with that theme. I do hope the game doesn't limit these excellent interactions and appearances to scripted moments. Most scenes involving mutants we've seen so far are scripted. I really want to see more of this freeform, and I hope the majority of interactions in the game are. I praise the original Stalker for how it just opened the world and let you stumble around. NPCs could die and you need to deal with the consequences, and when set pieces took away that freedom, it felt less interesting, less immersive. In the third game, your endings rely partially on keeping NPCs alive, so I hope we get a great sense of freedom from this new title. To that, Stalker 2 is using a system they're calling A-Life 2.0, which will simulate NPC, mutant, and faction actions throughout the zone, which will lead to a more dynamic world. I always hesitate when I see this kind of system. Will it be implemented well? If it is well implemented, it'll be a game changer. A dynamic world would add a ton of replayability, having mutants move through the world alongside other NPCs. The devs describe their system as factions and mutants are fighting for living space, migrating, capturing new places, or retreating to safer areas. In Clear Sky, they had a faction war system. I wonder if this is an extension of that. In terms of mutants, we'll see most mutants return, and new mutants have also been mentioned by the devs, but without any details at this stage. We've had glimpses of blind dogs, flesh, bloodsuckers, and human enemies so far. The weapon system looks more diverse, and we get to see the character attach something while on the move without a menu. We see this a couple of times, but it's most clear while the player runs through this factory. The devs have confirmed more than 30 types of firearms, each with their own set of modifications, and the character will be able to install on the move. but more advanced upgrades will need a technician. In the later Stalker games, we had some really low level weapon modding, and most of this was stat based and didn't change the gun visuals. For the time, that was fine, but I'm really glad we get to see visual changes in the upcoming title. I hope we can craft some sick looking guns and really play out the character we want. Speaking of gear, we also get to see some artifacts. The method of finding them is the same as in Clear and Call of Pripyat. You'll need a detector. There are multiple that can be used throughout the game, both new and old, and you'll need to likely navigate some dangerous anomaly fields to get them. I hope we get some really unique traits this time around with artifacts, maybe traits that can directly impact the Stalker. If you're not familiar with artifacts, they are unique to the zone and grant special properties to the person wearing them. In the original games, they would increase your max health, increase your stamina regen for sprinting, lessen bullet, melee, or other forms of damage, and more. If you're also unfamiliar with the prior games, you might be asking what an anomaly is. Anomalies are strange occurrences in the environment that are generally pretty deadly. In this clip, we see a flesh picked up by one and torn apart. These electric zones can also be anomalies. They can also show up as poison or corrosive, and much more. I hope they expand on these in Stalker 2. I'd love to see new and varied anomalies, and we see one of those here with this weird bubble that splits into others. In Clear Sky, some anomalies could even teleport you back to a certain location, so the possibilities are kind of endless. Continuing on the gear theme, we get some scenes of the player looting in this trailer. I really hope they've developed this further. This does look like early footage, but we don't have significant detail on how looting will work or what it'll look like. In the original trilogy, loot was kind of everywhere. Ammo, meds, guns, artifacts. If you went looking, you could find them. So I hope we have something similar here. While we've not seen a great deal of the menus, we do know that you will have a hunger and thirst requirement, and that surviving in the world is also a mechanic, including a medical system, but details are pretty thin. In this clip we see the character bandaging. It might be the days of spam healing are gone. In the original games, you would just click a button and it would automatically heal you, so you could largely stand in front of a stream of bullets and just heal your way through. At the time, this was fine, but it looks like they're going for a more modern approach with the character having to stop and bandage. In relation to food and water, food, while relevant, wasn't going off every 10 minutes in the original games, so I hope we see that here. I don't want to be eating every 20 minutes while trying to remain immersed in the world. I'd rather see it pop up every hour or so. Hey, what's up? Quick editing note here. There will be multiplayer in Stalker 2, but it will not be available on release. We're not sure what this is going to look like yet, whether it'll be regular team deathmatch or something else, but it will come in a future update. Cheers. Stalker 2 is releasing on the 5th of September, and I can't be more hyped. I really hope they stick to their roots and have an amazing open world. The original games for me began to fall off in their closing hours when the story pulled you into a linear shooting gallery. I'd love to see Stalker 2's story give you a greater sense of exploration in the environment and really lean into the zone as an avenue for telling stories. I want the overarching story to be gripping, but I also want to be pulled off to explore every chance I get. What are you looking forward to the most in Stalker 2? The visuals? The story? The A-Life simulations? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you want to help me out, hit the like button, and if you want to see more Stalker content, subscribe, as I'll be watching this game closely and have videos currently up on the first two games, with the third coming soon. This game has the potential to be my all-time greatest, or my biggest disappointment. Only time will tell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.